Today we're going to discuss the great Italian composer Antonio Vivaldi. Vivaldi was a late Baroque composer who was born in Venice. His father was a violinist at St. Mark's Cathedral, and interestingly, Vivaldi was actually ordained as a priest. He was known affectionately as the Red Priest, given the clothing that he wore. We can in fact see how his religious convictions influenced his music. It is always spiritual in some way or another. He was revered as a great violin teacher, as a composer, as a conductor. Another interesting point about his life was that he spent much of his time working for an orphanage, a girls' orphanage in Venice known as the Piazza. Many of his compositions were actually written for the girls in this orphanage. Many of his orchestral works were performed by them, they were premiered by them. So this is a very interesting detail about Vivaldi. He was a priest, he composed for a girls' orphanage. He was, as we mentioned, renowned as a virtuoso, perhaps the greatest violinist of his age, a great composer. He left behind about 450 concerti grossi and also solo concertos. But unfortunately, in his final years, his popularity waned, and he in fact died in poverty. And as was the case with many other composers of that time, his music was forgotten for about 200 years until it was revived sometime in the 1900s. In fact, that he wasn't the only one. There were many composers, we mentioned Palestrina and others, who were forgotten for 200 years, and then their music had a revival in recent times. We find this quite staggering considering the incredible popularity of his four seasons. We're going to look at the work now. The La Primavera, spring, being one of the most popular of the concertos from this work. And he's now renowned as one of the greatest composers of the late Baroque. Bach actually looked at some of his violin concerti and transcribed them for organ. We consider him to be in the same category as Bach and Handel, one of the great late Baroque composers, but he wasn't well known for 200 years. He was well known during his time, but he has left an incredible mark in history with many concerti. I mean, the Four Seasons might be the most well known, but in fact, his concerti for violin and double violin concertos, and even his choral works have already left behind a mark. They are well-loved works, they are performed regularly, and we're going to look specifically at his Four Seasons, at his spring, La Primavera, from the Four Seasons. Vivaldi's most popular work is the concerto La Primavera, or Spring, from the Four Seasons. The Four Seasons is a set of four solo concertos for violin, string orchestra, and basso continuo. The work depicts the sounds and events of each of the seasons. It is thus an example of Baroque program music. Spring was already highly popular during Vivaldi's time. It consists of three movements. The first movement is fast and in ritornello form. The second movement is slow, and the third movement is fast and also in ritornello form. The first movement, Allegro, is in E major and opens with an orchestral ritornello depicting spring's arrival. Each of the ritornello's two phrases is first played loudly and then repeated softly. This is an example of the terrace dynamics typical of Baroque music. The opening ritornello is then followed by an alternation between solo and tutti sections which present part of the ritornello theme. The first solo section presents a theme which depicts birdsong. This is imitated by high trills and repeated notes played by the solo violinist and two violins from the orchestra. The second episode depicts murmuring streams conveyed by running notes in the violins. The second solo section contains string tremolos and rapid scales which depict thunder and lightning. The ritornello now returns, but this time in the minor mode instead of the major. Throughout the movement, The pictorial passages provide contrast with the return of the ritornello theme. Here you can hear the tutti section play the ritornello opening phrase forte. It is then repeated piano. Here you can hear the closing phrase with syncopations forte repeated piano in a major key. Here you can hear the solo violin joined by two violins from the orchestra playing high trills and repeated notes. Here you can hear the tutti playing the ritornello closing phrase forte. Here you can hear the violins piano playing running notes. The cellos piano play running notes below sustained notes in the violins. Here you can hear the tutti section playing the ritornello closing phrase forte. Here you can hear string tremolos forte. The solo violin introduces rapidly ascending scales in the high register. This virtuoso display is answered by low string tremolos. Here you can hear the tutti playing the ritornello closing phrase in the minor key forte. Here you can hear the solo violin joined by two violins from the orchestra playing high repeated notes and trills in a minor key. Here you can hear the tutti playing the ritornello opening phrase with a slight variation forte ending in a major key. Here you can hear the solo violin playing running notes accompanied by the basso continuo. Here you can hear the tutti playing the ritornello closing phrase forte, repeated piano in a major key. The second movement is marked largo e pianissimo sempre. For this movement, Vivaldi provides the following background imagery. And then, on a pleasant meadow covered with flowers, lulled by the soft murmuring of leaves and branches, the goatherd sleeps with his faithful dog at his side. This is a peaceful slow movement in C-sharp minor. It is quieter than the opening movement. Only the solo violin and orchestral violins and violas play. An expansive melody in the solo violin depicts the goatherd's slumber. A rocking figure in the violins depicts the rustling of leaves. The violins imitate the sound of the goatherd's barking dog by sounding a repeated figure with a short, long rhythm. The movement has a consistent texture, rhythm, and dynamic level. Here one can hear the opening theme of the slow movement played over a rocking figure. One can hear the short, long note rhythmic figure in the violas, which depicts the barking of the dog. The third movement is marked Danza Pastorale. This movement is in E major and features an alternation between the tutti and solo sections. There is a playful ritornello theme in dotted rhythms. Vivaldi describes this movement as depicting nymphs and shepherds dancing in the fields. Sustained tones in the lower strings imitate the drone of the bagpipes. The solo violin has brilliant melodic sequences. Here you can hear the tutti playing the ritornello theme, which consists of a lilting melody in the major mode. Here you can hear the solo violin accompanied by the basso continuo. Here you can hear the tutti playing a varied form of the ritornello theme in the minor mode. Here you can hear the solo violin joined by a violin from the orchestra. Here you can hear the solo violin staccato accompanied by the violins. There are faster rhythms. Here you can hear the tutti playing the ritornello theme in the major mode. It also plays this theme in a varied form in the minor mode. Here you can hear the solo violin accompanied by a sustained tone in the cellos and basses in the minor mode. Here you can hear the tutti playing the ritornello theme in the major mode.